or in ill health. She just has another commitment. So if we can get started. First item on the agenda this morning is the approval of the minutes of the May 21st meeting. Are there any additions or corrections?
You want me to perform the roll call?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Please call the roll. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Dussault? Here. Ms. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Runge?
Present.
Mr. Downey? Chairman Zimmerman?
Here. Good morning. Okay, now we will move into the approval of the minutes of the May 21st meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Mm-hmm. Okay. Chair would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The minutes are approved unanimously. Public comment. Jim, are you part of the staff or the public this morning?
I'm part of the staff.
Okay.
Back up for
Whoa. Next time you need a day off, you know who to fill in for you.
Requests are always available, but
They're also subject to approval.
approval is a concern.
Yes, I understand that. Okay, no public comments. Let's move into the agenda then under old business. The Centennial Tree Planting Project for completion by 2019. What would we like to address as far as that is concerned today?
I think that the first thing would be a letter announcing the project. A very simple one-sentence statement says, "We're pleased to present to the staff and those associated a Centennial Tree project and look forward to full participation." Just something sweet, short, simple.
Might it, as a suggestion, be better to approach it as a recommendation to City Council to
Your microphone's not on, Chris.
It's on now.
Okay.
would it be better to consider a request to City Council as an announcement explaining what our proposal is and asking for their approval and participation, and then if they have questions, we could flesh out any questions that they might have?
Certainly.
Okay, well, if that is something that the commission's interested in pursuing, if you'd like to make that in the motion, in the form of a motion, that might be best, and then we can proceed from there.
I'm thinking about it. I so move that a letter be presented to the City Council and City of Vero Beach staff announcing the project in its entirety and looking for their comment and approval of the project.
Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Under discussion, any fleshing out or modification to the original motion as it is defined?
Do you have to state what the project name is? He said the project.
Yeah, I think that would be something that would be helpful. That certainly is understood in what would be prepared, and maybe the outline that Chris presented could be included in the project, and maybe that could follow just kind of a sentence or two describing the intent and the implementation, and then this would kind of flesh that out.
Wouldn't Chris's tree planting project synopsis that he prepared on the 21st, wouldn't that suffice to do everything?
Well, I think it's important that we explain in some kind of a sentence something other than just the first line.
No, that's not my point. My point is, if you, rather than attach it, why wouldn't we simply say, this is the project that we are requesting that you approve, and here it is?
That's fine. I'd like to suggest then that we ask you to prepare the introductory statement so that it meets what you're concerned with. My whole point is, I think it would be appropriate, but I'm not going to write it, that the commission say, we've been thinking of long-term projects. With the 100-year anniversary of the city of Vero Beach coming up, we came up with this suggestion. Here's enclosed an outline, and we would be pleased to answer any questions that the city council had, and here's our proposal. That's how I would kind of structure it if I were doing it. But I'd be happy, and I'm sure the rest of us would, to have you put something together and let us comment on it. We've got plenty of time. This isn't anything that's got to be done tomorrow.
Not a problem.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Great. Thank you. And Marilyn, if you could put that together, that'd be wonderful.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. And then if you just give it to the clerk,
Right.
she can email it to
I'll
us.
just email it, sure.
Yeah. But through her, right? Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. That was easy. Tree protection ordinance and mitigation fines for improper pruning. What is our posture here, and what I didn't have a chance to fully read the entire extent of the minutes of the last meeting, unfortunately, because as I said, I got back last night. So I'm really not up to speed. I have to apologize for that. So somebody who was here, if they could kind of bring us up to date on what they think needs to be done next. Maybe that's you.
I guess it was me that brought it up initially. I did a little bit of research, but just in a nutshell, what we found with one case of a pruning job that had been done was pretty much a hat rack. The way that our code is now, there isn't anything that you can do to fine somebody unless the tree dies. Period.
I remember reading that now.
Yes.
You brought back my memory to that extent.
So you can do these improper pruning techniques, and as long as a tree doesn't die, nothing happens. I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I just thought that was a little bit of a loophole.
Dichotomy, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, because
it doesn't really,
you can take off the entire canopy, every leaf on it, cut it down, because, frankly, most trees will grow back from that. Now, are they going to look good?
In some kind of form, but certainly not.
Certainly.
Something
but it's
that
not
would've-
going to die. And then I don't really think that we could say if it died 5 years later, you could come back into that person that did that pruning. I mean, I can't even imagine how you would keep track of that and say, hey, this tree did die. You could be blamed on a million other things.
Sure. And you couldn't hold the person responsible because it would never stand up and with any kind of challenge.
Right. And I, you go down this road and there's a whole lot of different circumstances that happen. I did a little bit of research. I was finding a hard time going into the code and just found some overviews and stuff, but there certainly was different definitions of what proper and improper pruning, and there's a lot of communities that do impose some kind of fine if you do just the improper pruning, not necessarily if it causes it to die. So I haven't really... I found Sunrise, Florida, and I think there was one more, so I need to still dig in a little bit better. And, of course, I'm not going to get down what kind of fine it would be because that's not my purview. I just thought that we needed to discuss this as a city. How are we going to look at it? And then if you do start looking at, well, if you do pruning that is against ANSI, which are the tree pruning standards that every arborist uses, and you're going to get a fine, shouldn't there be some kind of educational aspect as well? I don't know how big a can of worms this opens up, because there's a lot of communities. I know I always think back to Broward because they have a really comprehensive plan, and it's probably taken them many years to develop, but they require anybody that trims trees for a living to have a license. And they have to pass a test. And if you don't have that, then you can't trim trees. And you get a penalty. I don't think we have any kind of resources to do anything like that.
Nor do we probably get much support to try and implement something that,
Exactly. I mean, that is really, really huge.
that intense.
So, you know, I don't know how much. It's something that we really need to think about and kind of look at the different. You know, you're really opening up a box of worms. So,
I guess I have two questions. Number one, this is a revised ordinance. Is that correct or not?
Yeah,
Has this been revised?
this is the latest.
The latest.
Okay. So then my immediate question is, was there a reason that planning, when they revised this, didn't address the point that you just brought up?
We'd have to ask Maria. I wasn't involved with writing.
Well, I just thought maybe there was some rationale we weren't aware of, you know, that said, oh, we shouldn't go that route, or we've thought about it and we can't recommend that. Because I certainly agree with Nanette. Now, the other thing, because I serve on the county code enforcement board, we've had a number of cases come up just exactly like that. And essentially what the county does is say, and I'm not saying that's the end all, but I'm just saying there's an example. It helps if the two ordinances are somewhat similar.
Oh, clearly.
Just from an education point of view.
Because most people don't know if they're
In other
inside the
words-
city limits or in the county. And,
Yeah. If you have a property that comes under the purview of the landscape requirement ordinance of the county, and you go in and trim something, and it doesn't meet the requirements of what that either plant and or tree is supposed to represent according to the ordinance, then you have to replace it. And if you come in and trim a bunch of natural stuff, then and take out stuff that you weren't supposed to, then you're going to get fined. We had one case where the individual was fined $50,000,
Wow.
and remediation was required also.
Right.
So there are some guidelines out there that maybe could be looked at to see, and only, again, for the ease of uniformity. It sure makes it easier for people who live here to understand that here's what you have to do, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're in the city and the county,
Right,
even
like
though they
Nanette
have
said.
individual ordinances.
And when you're talking about, and because that's, you know, obviously, you know, I'm a little bit up on the planning stuff, but that's not my department. But when you're talking about what's required by your site plan, that's completely different. I mean, that's commercial, right?
Yes.
It's not residential.
Yeah, it's not residential. It's
So-
all commercial.
This particular tree was on somebody's property. So, you know, where does that fall under?
Well, you know, you might consider having a rule that says that if somebody trims a tree and did not get a permit, which would have given them some guidelines on how it should be trimmed because of the guidelines associated with the national organization, and then they're responsible on a fine basis for what they did, whether the tree dies or didn't die, because they've essentially markedly changed that tree as it was in its present form. Now, you know, that gets harder to do because now you're dealing with single-family homeowners and or the residential side of the business.
And nobody has to get a permit to trim trees, right?
No.
That's what I was just going to ask too. That because the people are going
No.
to say it's my tree, in my yard. I can do what I
mean,
want.
Do you have to have a permit to take a tree out?
You need a permit
Removal.
to take a tree
Removal,
down
but not to
or
trim. Okay.
relocate.
All right.
And the code.
You're right. I remember that.
I don't know that any community requires a permit to trim a tree. Conversely, what Broward does is they make sure that everybody that trims trees for a living
Right.
is licensed.
Yeah.
And with that license comes training.
Yeah.
It's just like you have a pesticide license, you have a
Yeah.
tree trimmer license.
But what's the recourse, even under the Broward plan, where somebody comes in and
That's what I was
Joe, tree trimmer, was told by the owner, hey, look, I want these trees reduced in size by half, or the canopy's too big, it blocks my sign. You know, the
Joe, tree
standard.
trimmer gets fined, and if it happens, I think 2 or 3 times, they get their license pulled, and they're not allowed to do that anymore.
But they do get fined.
Yes.
So there has to be some criteria on what you get fined for and what you don't get fined for.
And they do. They define tree abuse, topping, all that stuff. But again, that's a program that has to be implemented. It has to be, done on a region-wide basis, I would think. I mean, this is Broward County. It's the county, so it's the whole thing. It's not just one city.
Rather than us trying to track or attack the technical nature of how something like that might be construed, what would be wrong with us sending a recommendation through City Council to the Planning Department stating that we would recommend that the Planning Department do some research on what other communities are doing to prevent this kind of activity from happening, because the Planning Department's aware of being caught in that, you can't win 21 catch situation where it's not dead, but you know darn well it's not going to live in any reasonable form. And that way, we've got the professionals looking at it from a professional point of view. Mr. City Manager, what are your thoughts?
I'm not sure you have to send that formal request to the city council. I think
We already are looking into it
Oh, are you?
slowly. Been vacations. To
Okay,
planners.
well, maybe.
And the stuff that I found, I'll forward to Gail. And
Maybe we're beating a horse that doesn't need punishment, and if it's already going to be addressed.
Well, it's being addressed because it was brought to the tree commission last month.
Then maybe we should wait and see what they come back with, and just have an understanding that before it's implemented, that we get an opportunity, which we normally do anyway, to review it. How's that?
yep.
What do you think?
I don't understand one portion of it, and that is if there is a national standard, why wouldn't that be the universal rule both for the county and the city?
I guess the problem is the difficulty in implementing that, because it requires either education, registration, licensing of the people doing the work, and the city council is going to be reticent to pass a onerous rule like that could result in meaningful fines without some idea that it was done in an orderly fashion.
And then just having the staff that goes to be in charge of following up on all that. I'm 99% certain that they have an urban forester that takes care of all of this in those areas that have this kind of program.
And there are urban foresters, as we know, that we can call upon on a limited basis to come and give advice on things like that. He said he'd be happy to help us in any area.
He did.
And he's come to
he did.
our.
But I'm saying they've got somebody on staff.
Oh, I understand
their
that.
job is driving around and
we
making
used
sure.
to too. We had an urban forester
Exactly.
that was shared between the county and the city, and
Right.
it was very
Right.
helpful to both. And unfortunately,
And a little bit, I don't know if you were asking why doesn't everybody do tree trimming to the standards?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm basically saying is that if you have an organization that created a standard and that's their specialty, why would a city or a county not adopt that same standard because it's been created by people who know what they're doing to begin with?
well, I think they want to create the standard because they quote it in the ordinance that this is how things are supposed to be done.
Right.
It's a matter of trying to educate people and train them
Right.
on how to implement that standard, because you're talking about a great deal of difference and expertise on the true professional tree trimming organizations. And Joe
Homo,
Midnight
whatever.
tree trimmer who has a chainsaw and goes out.
Well, and the other aspect of that is how many people trim their own trees.
Good point.
Don't hire any professional to trim a tree. And more importantly, if you think about the clamor during the month of May, trim back, trim back, trim back, because it's hurricane season, I'm sure that there are many people who can't afford a professional tree trimmer who do just that and don't do it properly. So it seems to me then that the licensing issue, or not licensing, but the permit issue would be the point where anybody who was going to trim a tree, be they professional or non, needs a permit.
Yeah, I think
And that is going to create an absolute nightmare, and I can't imagine any city council
I
in their
agree.
right mind passing that.
I agree.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
So I think those are all points that hopefully Gail takes back to her members in the planning department as issues that we've at least raised to be considered. And the city manager has been party to this discussion, so he's involved, and that's our backup plan.
But thank you for bringing it to our attention. I'm serious. It is a
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, the tree, if it's that compromised, it really should, in one way, should be just cut out and replanted, something else replanted.
But you got to be able to prove that it.
Yeah.
If it isn't dead, it isn't dead. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty black and white. If it's alive, it's alive.
I think that pertains more
Maybe
to
on
the
life
residential
support, but
part
not
of the
almost alive.
implementation than it does to the commercial.
Right.
Because the commercial
Yeah.
specifically says the tree is to have a minimum canopy, caliper, etc. And if they trimmed it back so it doesn't have it, then it doesn't meet the requirements and it needs to be replaced. And that's the position that the county takes.
Exactly. But case in point, move off of the one that was at a homeowner's. Look at what was done at the credit union. Everybody saw that.
Now,
They didn't have to replace those trees because guess what? They didn't die.
Right.
They're not trees anymore. I mean,
But it
biologically they're trees, but they,
doesn't meet the requirement. The
Well-
tree is supposed to have these kind of minimum at the time it was planted, and it doesn't meet the requirement if it doesn't have that.
I don't know that it says that in ours.
Yeah, I don't have the
Yeah.
code with me today.
See,
Yeah, anyway.
we were trying to come up with wording too of how the actual. Now I'm not going to think of the word. Was completely like the nature of the tree was completely compromised. That it wasn't even really serving its tree purpose.
Well,
Being
that's the
so
whole
butchered, yeah.
That's the idea of the canopy, where it has to have a minimum canopy of X number of feet and caliper. And the caliper is going to generally control the age of the tree and as a minimum to be planted, and how it was grown in the environment. It is a factor of the canopy, because if it came up from a growing nursery where they were placed too close together, they're not going to have the spread that you need. No comments, Chris?
Well, most communities also say that, you're dealing with an installation which says 14 feet by 6 feet or whatever the requirements are, but they also say shall reach 50% canopy coverage within 3 to 5 years. And so there is language within most city submissions for landscape projects that state that when you plant a project, that the trees have to meet this caliper, which is pretty small in honesty. Most of them are 14 to 16 feet, 8 foot of spread. So this is not a 50-year-old oak. This is something that's grown in 10 to 12 years. But it also states that within X amount of time, it shall achieve 50% of the canopy
So
of the
if it
vacant
was
lot. So
wrongly
there's
cut back, you'd know it.
you would,
Right,
but
so
then this is a very, as you said, can of worms, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And an owner could say, I want my money's worth when my palm trees are trimmed, and go outside the state guidelines, which say you only remove brown fronds.
Yeah.
So this is there's a lot of gray area involved in something like this.
Well, my knowledge of both the city and the county ordinances in this area do not include language like you described.
Indian River
there's-
Shores, Town of Orchid,
I'm talking about City of Vero Beach and the county. And again,
And they probably
many individual communities, because of landscape requirements, have ordinances that have generally been developed by landscape architects, and so they would have that kind of language in there, or be more pertain to have that in the ordinance.
and those trees before they got butchered did have that canopy,
Yeah.
and the caliper is still there. Caliper
Yeah.
didn't go away.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have the shade creating.
But if you don't
abilities.
have then, and if you do anything to change that aspect of the tree, that canopy, then you get X amount of fine. You know, they did what they were supposed to. I mean, the people that did that weren't the people that had planted it. That was a new company that came in.
Well, look at some of the other instances. You got hurricane damage. Hurricane comes through and knocks the tree over, and it has to be removed because it's damaged so badly.
Yes.
Has to be replaced
Yes.
if it's part of a landscape plan. It's struck by lightning, and the trunk is split in half, and the tree is effectively doesn't meet the requirements anymore. So there are other things other than tree trimming that can affect it. And then you've got the one that hopefully we don't have to face, and you have, and that's disease.
Right.
Same kinds of situation, same end result.
Oh, sure.
And so those are items I would hope that would be covered, would be mentioned, so people won't say, well, it wasn't my fault. The hurricane took the tree away. It still should be replaced if it's part of a commercial landscape plan.
It would.
Yeah. Anything else? Gail, I hope that helps. We've given you more problems than we've given you solutions. But, commissions are good at doing things like that. Have a great day.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else under old business that didn't get agendized that should be covered? I don't know of anything. Okay. Area of new business? Anything anyone is aware of? Okay. Treasurer's report?
The tree dedication has $973.27, and the tree removal replacement has $40,319.01.
Well, if something like the proposed plan gets put into effect, why, we would end up using or potentially using a fair amount of that over a period of time, especially depending on the scope of the project, And that's something that probably should be taken into account, because the longer that money sits there in that fund not being used, the more susceptible it is to being used for other purposes.
Right.
So hopefully we will come up with something that satisfies that. Thank you for your report. Chairman's matters, I have nothing. I'm still trying to figure out what time it is. And so let's go to members' matters.
I would just like to touch on the Centennial Tree Project one more time, please.
Oh, okay.
This is a once-in-a-100-year chance to make a testimony that we care about the future of the city of Vero Beach and generations that come. And granted, there's time, but no man builds a castle without first weighing the costs, let they be found a fool for not finishing. And I think it very wise that we take this time and simply find out that most times the simplest solution is the best. And that it's not going to be selecting a street, it's going to be eliminating streets that comes down to the final conclusion of where to plant. And I would simply like to put before this commission that with each meeting, we work towards a dedicated timeline, that once this letter is presented to the City Council and the City of Vero Beach staff, that a presentation be made to the City Council so that this has become something that all of Vero Beach can take hold of, not just the city staff, the planners, and this commission, that residents become involved and take ownership in their city.
Can't disagree with anything you said, Chris.
Well-
I'm not sure how we go about implementing that because creating awareness, as we know, is not the easiest thing in the world. And although the advantage we have is the fact that we're talking 2019, so there's time to try and get the word out to people through various means. And again, once the project is identified, it's easier to create education about what's taking place. But your point's well taken as far as making people aware, because if they're truly aware and truly interested, there may be competition for trying to get their own physical location identified as the one to receive the benefit of the additional tree planting.
And again, that's sort of why we leave it to the professionals, those who are under the payroll of the city of Vero Beach, to make the choice, to come up with the final location, the specifications, so that in the resident taking ownership, they're coming alongside what the city's doing as opposed to guiding the city in what to do. This is a key project, and it's one that I don't recall in my lifetime in the city of Vero Beach has been done. I mean, I've been a resident of the city for close to 50 years now, and I can't recall anything of this scope or scale outside of maybe the Royal Palm Point project. But this is something that's going to mark 100 years of city history. And I think the more it's discussed, the more it's looked at, the more it's publicized, the smoother it's going to run.
Okay.
I drove around probably, well, every time I drive around, but I drove around specifically for,
Get some ideas.
yeah. And are we married to doing tree planting on both sides of the road to create a canopy? Because honestly, I can't find any place.
No, I agree with you. I think that's why, the original statement said that it could be a canopy, it could be an alley, it could be a project that fills in voids within an already existing canopy, and that you might not be able to accomplish a project of this scope on one street, like Atlantic Boulevard or whatever the street is chosen. And so by eliminating streets from the list, well, you take out state roads, you take out county roads that pass through city limits.
I did all that.
And you're going to come up with a list of possibilities on a map that's highlighted, and you go, okay, here's 20 choices. Out of those 20 choices, by using the simplest answer, you come up with 3 streets.
I tried so hard to go around and look to see what we could do.
Well,
I went over the map 2 times,
Did you? Yeah.
and there was always something that was a roadblock. Whether it's a state road, a county road, way too many utilities, overhead utilities.
Or in ground problems.
Streets that were just a residential block long that, I don't know would have the impact for something of this magnitude. If you guys, when you're driving around, if you see anything, let me know, because I'm having a really hard time. Now, if we did more of a project in a place, I might be able to but there isn't anything that's void of trees right now.
I think that's a good point. And, since Chris was the nexus for the idea, maybe he had some areas in mind
Right.
that made him come up with that. And so maybe at the next meeting, he can share that with us and with you, and that'll give us kind of a place to start. What do you think, Chris?
To be honest, I don't. And that's why in the scope of the project, we leave this selection to the city staff, because they're the ones who are going to plan the project. They're the ones who are going to implement the project, and maintain the project. And I don't want to be in the position of dictating to the city or consulting the city on what they should do. We're here, I guess what you would say, in an advisory oversight. It's the only thing I can wrap my hands on.
And honestly,
And I
it's
trust the skill sets that they have.
it might be a little premature because it really does have to be. It has to come down, from. This is something that the city wants to do and spend money on and use the resources for. So, I'm looking just in anticipation, but.
Well, I think that's reasonable, though, because we don't want to be in a position of making a recommendation of implementing a project, not including the identification, if the ability to come up with reasonable areas for implementation are non-existent for whatever reason, because that doesn't make a lot of sense either. It's great to say it'd be wonderful to have the project, but if you can't find a place to do it, then you're causing a lot of angst among people saying, hey guys, why did you recommend this? Because we can't find a place to put it. And you're as familiar with the city of Vero Beach, public areas, more so than any of us are, because you're addressing them from one way or another. So I would look to your knowledge, expertise, and just innate evaluation as kind of an indicator of where things might go.
Well, then, to that point, I have a couple of issues. Number one, I would then say that we should refrain from sending anything to the city council until we actually have a better vision of what we're really talking about and its feasibility. So I would make a motion at a later point for that. But the second issue is if we've got a federal road in US 1, so we can't do anything there.
Right.
We've got a state road in 60, so we can't do anything there.
And A1A.
We've got A1A, we can't do anything there.
Right.
So it seems to me that while I agree with you, this should be something that we defer to the people who know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I still think we need to have some kind of guidance as to what we're really envisioning for you to create. And one street highly traveled, forgive me for being a lawyer, but that's really vague. And I think we need much more guidance ourselves. And once Chris said, well, I didn't envision anything, I think that's what we need to do. We need to pinpoint more what we really want to do so that we're not laying a burden. You certainly, I've been on this commission long enough to know you don't really need any more work. So the bottom line is I would move that our former motion to send something to the city council is premature, and that we wait until we have essentially articulated better what we are interested in doing.
Yeah,
that would be my motion.
And I would certainly agree with your concern. We're talking about feasibility is
Yes.
what we're really talking about.
Yeah.
And, I was just sitting here thinking one way to attack that is to look at satellite views of the city of Vero Beach, which would give you some idea of where there is avoidance.
I've done that
in the tree canopy, and that
we have our Pro Viewer. We have everything GIS.
Yeah. And if you can't find anything there, I don't know where.
Right. Maybe I think Chris's idea is excellent.
Yeah.
Because we do want to celebrate a history like this, but maybe this isn't the end all and be all of the project. Maybe we need to refine the project.
Couldn't agree more. And in a multitude of counsel, there's great wisdom.
Well, I will take your earlier statement as a motion, and then I will ask if there's a second to the motion. I'll second the motion. So is there any further discussion on the motion?
I just think with 4 years of time available, that a project of some scope to recognize, just as Victory Boulevard recognized in this event in the city's history, that this can be accomplished.
Oh, I don't
Chris,
think
I don't
that's.
think either
that's-
one of us disagree with
Yeah,
you. I
that's
think
not the motion. The motion is it's
just-
premature to go to the city council
No.
until we really have a far better cohesive idea of what we want to do. And the feasibility that's being pointed out means that if let's assume they adopted this, then you're left with, well, let me find the street, and that doesn't make any sense. We want this to be, I love your idea, we just need to refine it. That's all the motion is. Motion is to not send anything
just
to the
to
city
delay it, it's not to not send it. Yeah.
for now.
Any further comments? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And are we, do we want to open up looking at any of the park areas? Or
I think we should.
I think we can look at everything.
I agree.
I think Chris's statement in earlier today is we need to eliminate, and I think that would, rather than seek out something, I think the logical thing would be let's eliminate what we cannot do. And we've eliminated by US 1, A1A, and Route 60.
yeah, all the ideas that I had, oh, that's a state road. Oh, that's,
Yeah, I mean, you simply take a map of the city of Vero Beach and a highlighter and start marking off what you cannot do, because all things being equal, simpler answers are generally better than complex ones.
Okay. Anything else under members' matters? All right. Next item is our next meeting date, which is July 16th. I guess I'd just like to make a couple of comments, having given it more thought under chairman's matters. We have 2 openings right now, and I would just like to encourage us, because we currently serve, to consider talking to individuals that we think might be potential members. And I would suggest that we direct those towards people like the women's, what term do I want? Circles, you know.
The garden club.
The garden club members, people who have expressed interest in planting and things of that sort. People who we may know who are master gardeners because they have an interest in that area. Individuals like Chris and my former involvement, which involved professional landscape companies who have interest, and maybe people who are landscape architects. Again, all I'm trying to say is it's a lot more helpful to try and have a stable commission, and a commission that has the ability, based on their interest, to continually create quorums, which makes the activities up here a lot more enjoyable and productive, really.
Productive, yes, I agree.
So
Okay.
I would just mention that.
And on the website, the criteria, the opening is there.
As far as I know, it's there. Is that correct?
Yes, it's just getting updated because we only had 1 originally listed. Now we're updating.
Now we
to
have 2.
alternates.
Okay,
Yeah, see,
because
we have
I
no-
will,
We have no alternate.
I will post it in the clubhouse of where I am, because we have an entire committee that does nothing but maintains the trail that goes out to the intercoastal. And these are very, very knowledgeable men and women, so they may very well be interested.
Good. Okay. If there's nothing else to come before us today, the chair would entertain. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking,
You got to stop doing that.
I know. Do we want to look at, because I really think it's a cool idea. I'm really trying to find a spot to do this in.
Yeah,
Wh-
I tend to be more in mind as you are. I don't want to eliminate things. I want to come up with some potential locations that corroborate the feasibility.
And it wasn't just me. I drove out another manager. Come with me and have fun, And
Yeah.
I came up with a goose egg. Do we want to only look at something that is planted because it is tree and beautification? I'm thinking, what if we did some kind of artwork? I know it's off the wall, but what if there was a 100th anniversary commemorative sculpture somewhere, art in the park kind of thing?
I don't know. Is there a cultural committee in the city that I'm not aware of?
Does the city have plans for, I'm sure they do, for celebrating the 100th anniversary?
The answer to the question is we have not really discussed it. So we're sort of one of those organizations that when we get about 2 years out, then all of a sudden it'll hit us. And so I'm glad to see that we have someone thinking ahead of that. But the dynamics here is more of a 2-year plan out.
Yeah, this is sort of why we gave the timeline that said by 2017, we've got 2 years to select a location. To say today that there's a goose egg, you still have 2 years to crack that goose egg. I mean, prior work, I was involved with projects that lasted for 20 years. And it took 4 years just to come up with what you're going to do. It took 2 years to come up with a survey to establish exactly. And then 18 more years to complete a project. So this is something, not to take this any further, but it's achievable.
Well,
I think the good thing-
in relation to your question or to your statement with respect to art, we are a tree city. And it seems to me that from this commission, there should be something that's live and growing in remembrance of 100 years of the city's life. I think that's, I mean, again, I love Chris's idea. I just think we need to develop it better. But maybe we need to write a letter to the city council to remind them that 2019 it's 100 years.
Well, I think the city manager is well aware.
Well, no, I know he is.
I think he understands the dynamics of working with his city council better than we do. And it could well be that the city's focus when it comes to that is something entirely different for its major focus. Who knows?
Just to put it in perspective, that's 4 elections. Things change. So that's why we have commissions, because they stay in sort of continuity through the whole process.
Correct.
But I will say one that's very complimentary of the city of Vero Beach, the fact that we can't find a street that is not tree lined. I mean, it speaks volumes
Yes.
for the fact that we are a tree city. We have historically respected that fact. And now we're having a difficult time finding a place where we can
Because we've done
put
such a good job.
done such a good job,
Right.
and
Point well
our
taken.
requirements.
I know. Pretty much everywhere where I found where there wasn't any trees, there was a reason.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all those power lines there. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't plant something smaller, but
Lower canopy.
Or it also says that there's no reason that in your plans that undergrounding might be a part of the process.
Underground utilities.
but then,
so it's-
but
which
It's got a cost, but
it has a real benefit too, as far as continuing
hurricanes and that
service.
kind of stuff.
Sure.
I mean, but I mean, if we're thinking this far ahead and we're thinking grandiose
Right.
is a way of doing it. What's the name of the street that's just to the east of Riverside Park? It's a main thoroughfare there.
Flameville.
No, the one at
Mockingbird?
Mockingbird. Now that's a well-traveled street. It's not in a historical district, but you've got areas. There are plenty of trees in the park. There are not very many trees along the street right away. And I just throw that out as
Right.
one that I think about.
Well, that's why I suggested taking a look at the aerials.
Yeah.
Because that gives you a real quick indicator of open areas. Now, that doesn't mean that's one that's feasible, but it gives you some places to start looking.
And it's very true. And using that as an example, Mockingbird, I mean, you'd have to engage those residents on that street. I mean, you're going to be planting a tree in their yard and you don't know how that is, but I guess that would apply to really virtually all streets. But in the historical district, it's a little easier because everybody wants a tree.
Well, if it was in the city right away, I mean, and that's where
Yeah,
I
but
would think it would have to
It
be.
is, but it's still in there. When you're a homeowner, you know.
I
that's-
understand.
And
Well,
they're
the other thing
maintaining
is-
it all the way out to the edge of the road, so
Oh, I
it's
know.
still their yard.
We don't want to force a celebration on people. Protesters out, you know.
But what more to create awareness?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
That is true.
Yes.
But the
There
key
is
is
awareness, and then there is awareness.
Well, remember that old statement: all publicity is good publicity.
Right.
but the majority of people, I mean, if they think they're part of a celebration, I think you can
Yeah.
get them on board. It's just. But the good thing is, the other side of the street, we can plant anything we want to. So.
Okay,
Okay.
we're back to the chair entertaining a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, we're adjourned. Thank you, folks. We appreciate your attendance.